Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today, I'm going to talk about an adventure slash campaign supplement for Infinity called The Cost of Greed. I talked about the Adventures in the Human Sphere adventure supplement a few months ago, which is I think, 8 little unconnected adventures. This one is 5 adventures that are all part of a line, of a single investigation. And it's fantastic. In many ways, I actually think that Cost of Greed is a much better introduction to playing Infinity than the Adventures in the Human Sphere are. The scenarios are a little more straightforward, but still with a lot of good possibility baked into them, a lot of variability. One of the hallmarks of Infinity, of course, is that there are multiple routes to solve something. There are 3 different combat systems, physical and hacking and what they call Psy-War, which is like talking to people. And you can kind of take all of those routes in this. Obviously, there are certain challenges that can only be solved in one of those 3 ways. But it just has a lot of variety, and it is a pretty good story, all told, as well. Um, it starts on, and now let's get the big PDF so you can see this image a little better. Um, this is one of the aliens. There is, it is mostly a cyberpunk setting, but it is also space opera, and there are different planets, and there's a handful of different alien species in the world of Infinity as well. And the big main awful one is called the Combined Army, which is this kind of multi-species evil alien empire that has found the human sphere and is trying to attack them. And the main war front is the planet called Paradiso. And that is this, ironically named horrible jungle war zone kind of thing that is overrun by all of these big aliens that are trying to attack. And the story begins with you being sent there because some agent stumbled onto what might be a smuggling ring of voodoo tech. Voodoo tech is the kind of catch-all word for human technology based on captured alien technology. It's strictly outlawed in the human sphere, and no one is supposed to have it, but it's still pretty cool and powerful, and so a lot of people do, especially here on Paradiso. They will try to capture alien weapons and armor and artifacts and things like that, and then smuggle them off planet so they can be sold or they can be reverse engineered so that we can learn things from them, we can reproduce things from them. Anyway, and so that's how it starts. You get sent to Paradiso to try to figure out what is up with that smuggling ring. And then the first scenario and the last scenario are set. They need to be first and last. But as you go through, one of the things that's really well done about this campaign is that you will learn certain clues. And this is kind of, baked right into the Infinity setting. And if you read the Infinity core book, it talks about how to do investigative scenarios. Basically, there are a handful of fairly obvious clues. And I say obvious as a good thing, not a bad thing. It's not that the clues are boring, it's that once the characters find the clues, it's pretty obvious what they mean. Because if you're doing a mystery or an investigative scenario, you don't want the characters to find a cool clue and then either not realize it's a clue or not know how to follow up on it or things like that. Every GM who's tried to do this can tell you how easy it is to screw up clues. So this campaign has some pretty good clues. And what's great about it is that in the first scenario, when they find the clues, then they have a good idea of what to do next. And those 3 scenarios in the middle of the 5 can be done in any order. So if the characters are like, okay, we really need to do, we found a clue that talks about X and we found a clue that talks about Y, I think we should go look up why. So then you go off into, scenario 2, 3, or 4, whichever one it is that they are excited about following up on. And those scenarios are going to give them more clues that will point them back towards the other two that they haven't done yet. And then so they can do those 3 in any order, and they don't know that they're doing them out of order. They just think that they're following the clues and finding this really exciting thing. And then they get to the end and they have found all the clues and they put them together and they go, okay, now I know the end game. Now I know who's behind this. And then they rush off and they do scenario 5, and it's awesome. So not only is the campaign really well structured overall, the individual scenarios are great as well. The first scenario where they're on Paradiso, they're basically in kind of an army town. Kind of it almost feels like Vietnam era Saigon in a way, where there's, an occupying army that is there and needs to be entertained and supplied and equipped. And so there's kind of a little bit of a resistance movement, and there's a little bit of this kind of trashy, um, almost Vegas-y quality to the clubs and the restaurants that are there. And you'll be dealing with, a nightclub and a hotel and all these other things. And you're trying to track down your contact to see if they can tell you more about this smuggling operation they ran into. And in the process, you're going to gather a bunch of more clues, and you are going to be presented with 1 or 2 really great situations where you can go, okay, there's obviously many different ways to go about solving this. How are we going to do it? And each scenario is like that. They're relatively straightforward, which gives the players the chance to do what they are best at. And I find that in a game like Infinity, that is so important. If your group has built itself so that 2 or 3 of you are really good hackers and infiltrators, a straightforward combat scenario is going to be boring for them. And so all 5 of these have been designed so that your players can approach it in the way that makes them the most excited and the most happy. And that is really great. So, I kind of describe these scenarios in some way as sandbox. They're not, but they're sandbox scenarios in the sense that their objectives are clear and they can approach it any way they want. And each of the 5 scenarios has that same variability while also being completely different. So one of them takes place on Paradiso, one of them in Svartalfheim, one of them in Bakunin, which is or Bakunin, I always pronounce it weird, which is one of the nomad, big giant spaceships rather than a planet. So there's a lot of different things, and each scenario has a different focus, and each scenario has a different flavor. Anyway, there's not much else to say about Cost of Greed because I absolutely don't want to spoil anything for you. But I do want to say that this is a really good scenario. It's a really good campaign. I think that if you pick up the main book and you are looking for something to do, you want to run your characters through a game, I would definitely pick up Cost of Greed before I picked up Adventures in the Human Sphere. And go ahead and grab any faction books that you want, and that's totally fine. But in terms of just absolute gameplay, adventure supplement, Cost of Greed is where it's at. It is a really fantastic, well-designed, really fun and interesting scenario. So, yay, Cost of Greed. Anyway, that's been today's very short review. My name is Dan Wells, and you are awesome. I will see you on the next one. Bye.